The story unfolds within the bowels of the earth, in the heart of a place so secretive that even its existence is whispered among government agencies and conspiracy theorists. Arctic Apex, a top secret underground facility, remains hidden beneath the barren expanse of the Arctic, its entrance cunningly concealed within the rugged mountainside. The entrance is carved into the rocky face with meticulous precision. It is a foreboding portal to a world of enigmas. Massive blast-proof doors guards the threshold, bearing no insignia or identification, only the weight of secrets that could shatter reality. As one passes through the forbidding threshold, the true magnitude of Arctic Apex is revealed. The sprawling complex deep within the heart of the mountain is a labyrinth of gleaming steel and concrete, a testament to the fusion of cutting-edge technology and human ingenuity. Intricately designed to house and study cryptids, each section of Arctic Apex is a self-contained realm, meticulously quarantined and separated from the others. An intricate network of retractable roof-mounted machine guns stands poised like sentinels, ready to enforce the facility's security, with a lethal display of firepower at a moment's notice. These ominous guardians are a chilling reminder of the creatures that lurk within. At the heart of Arctic Apex's control hub stands the Central Autonomous Adjutant, or CAA, the true puppeteer of this technological theater. An artificial intelligence of incomprehensible sophistication, the CAA embodies cold logic and relentless precision. It orchestrates the facility's functions with unwavering determination, prioritizing the containment of all specimens above all else. The CAA controls metallic humanoid security droids that patrol the sleek space-age halls. These sentinel-like machines move with an uncanny grace, their metallic bodies glinting under the sterile LED lights that illuminate the facility. Each droid is a silent enforcer, its unblinking sensors and razor-sharp reflexes a testament to human progress. Amidst the sprawling infrastructure of Arctic Apex, colossal assistant loading bots stand as mechanical giants, capable of hoisting weights up to 20 tons. These massive machines, with articulated arms like the limbs of colossal insects, perform the heavy lifting required for the containment and study of cryptids. They are the silent laborers of the facility, tasked with the Herculean effort of managing the facility's logistics and, at times of emergency, the cryptids themselves. The hallways echo with a disconcerting hush, interrupted only by the faint hum of machinery and the distant footsteps of human security personnel and scientists. The sterile minimalist aesthetic of the facility belies its true purpose, the relentless quest to understand the cryptids housed within. As Dr. Elara Kane is shown around her new workplace, she is both in awe of its capacity and haunted by the memories of her past. Arctic Apex stands a testament to humanity's determination to understand these cryptids, but it also reminds her of what happened years ago. Elara Kane, now 35 years old, carries the weight of her family's legacy, a legacy marked by an encounter so horrifying it would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. Her single father, John Kane, a renowned cryptozoologist in his own right, had ventured into the Himalayas in search of the elusive Yeti. Elara, at the tender age of 10, had accompanied him, her wide eyes filled with wonder and excitement. Their expedition had started as a scientific quest, driven by a deep fascination. But it would soon descend into a nightmare that would leave scars upon Elara's psyche. On the fateful day that they stumbled upon a Yeti, they stumbled upon a family. A towering, shaggy behemoth accompanied by a smaller, more vulnerable counterpart, its child. The innocence and curiosity in the child's eyes had disarmed Elara's fear, but the family together had sent Elara's father's heart pounding. As the towering Yeti approached, John's trembling hand found its way to his rifle. Panic had struck him, and driven by the primal fear of the unknown, in that moment of sheer terror, he pulled the trigger, killing the young Yeti child. The anguished roar that followed still echoed in Elara's nightmares. The mother Yeti, consumed by grief and rage, descended upon them like a force of nature. She showed no mercy. Elara's father was reduced to lifeless ribbons of flesh in mere moments. Elara had managed to run, her small, terrified form disappearing into the treacherous terrain. She was the sole survivor of this dreadful encounter. Years have passed, and Elara's life became a relentless pursuit of knowledge, driven by the belief that understanding and compassion could bridge the chasm between humans and cryptids. Her quest had brought her here, to Arctic Apex, where she continued her studies and advocated for the protection of these enigmatic creatures. In the well-lit corridors of the facility, she was an anomaly, a woman who had faced the very worst that cryptids could offer and yet remained steadfast in her belief that they deserved protection. Her past had not hardened her heart. It had opened it to the possibility of coexistence. As the chilling Arctic winds howled outside, Elara stood in her new laboratory. Her mission had only just begun. The laboratory was a pristine haven of stainless steel surfaces and spotless labware. Elara's meticulous nature was reflected in every aspect of the room's organization, where order reigned supreme. Shelves were lined with neatly labeled vials and specimen containers that stood like silent sentinels guarding the lab. At the heart of the lab, there were a series of state-of-the-art microscopes and centrifuges, as well as other specialized equipment to assist Elara in the study of the cryptids. They allowed her to unravel the secrets of their biology and to decipher their DNA, and to unlock the mysteries of their evolution. Elara meticulously examined a sample of cryptid tissue under one of the microscopes. It was taken from a Wendigo, when her colleague, Dr. Samuel Thornton, a weathered and jaded scientist, entered the lab. He was in his late 50s. "Elara," he began, his voice carrying the wary cadence of a man who had seen too much. "Have you seen your first assignment? It's the Wendigo." Elara looked up from her microscope. "Yes, Sam, I heard. We need to do everything we can to help it." Samuel shook his head, his gray hair falling into his tired eyes. "Help it? Elara, we're studying these creatures not to help them, but to aid in their neutralization. The CAA's purpose is clear." Elara's brow furrowed in disagreement. "Sam, we have a chance to understand them, to show that they're not all monsters. They're misunderstood, victims of circumstance. We can find ways to coexist with them and to protect them and humans." Samuel's gaze bore into Elara with a mixture of frustration and resignation. "You're idealistic, Elara. I've seen the worst that these creatures can do. They're not to be trusted." The two scientists stood in stark contrast, their perspectives as divergent as the paths they believed the study of cryptids should take. In the dimly lit laboratory, they found themselves locked in a silent debate, torn between understanding and the reality of neutralization. Deep within Arctic Apex, under multiple layers of security, lay the cryptid that Elara was studying, the Wendigo. Its true name, James Hart, was a long-forgotten memory from the annals of history. He was the man who had once walked the earth as a sailor on the ill-fated HMS Erebus. James Hart's story was one of tragic desperation, a saga that had begun during a doomed Arctic expedition in the 19th century. Trapped in the unforgiving wilderness, surrounded by ice and snow as far as the eye could see, the sailors of the Erebus had faced an agonizing choice: starvation or the unthinkable. Driven to the brink of madness by hunger, James Hart and his fellow sailors had made a fateful decision. They had turned to cannibalism, consuming the flesh of their fallen comrades to survive. In doing so, they had unwittingly invoked a curse as old as time itself. The curse of the Wendigo, whispered about in the legends of indigenous peoples, was a malevolent force that transformed those who partook in cannibalism into thin, grotesque monsters with an insatiable appetite for human flesh. James Hart had become the embodiment of this curse, a creature with elongated limbs and sunken eyes, a grotesque caricature of who he used to be. Within the containment chamber, the Wendigo's presence was a manifestation of primal terror. Its emaciated form moved with an uncanny swiftness, its mottled bluish skin stretched taut over bone. Its eyes, once the windows to a sailor's soul, now glowed with an unnatural hunger, a hunger that transcended the limits of human comprehension. Staff Sergeant Michael Reynolds and his squad of 4 privates had the unenviable task of guarding the Wendigo. Yes, there was a colony of Bigfoots and several other skinwalkers contained here in the facility, but none of them were as fierce and deadly as the Wendigo. While they were big and strong, the Bigfoots mostly kept to themselves, preferring to mind their own business. Skinwalkers, elusive as they were very much mortal and vulnerable to the weapons carried by the ordinary soldier. But the Wendigo, it was a creature unlike any other. Sergeant Reynolds was a rugged man in his early 40s. He was the embodiment of duty and discipline. His grizzled features betrayed the years of military service, and he approached his assignment with a stern sense of responsibility. He had witnessed the horrors of combat, but nothing had prepared him for the terrors that lurked within Arctic apex. Reynolds had recently received a hardware upgrade in the form of a back-mounted brachial exoskeleton, allowing him to lift heavier loads or wield heavy ordnance. Private First Class Sarah Mitchell was a 28-year-old with a background in biology. She had been assigned to the squad due to her expertise in cryptid biology. Her inquisitive nature was tempered by a quiet determination to uncover the truth about these enigmatic creatures. She was the squad's voice of reason, a calming presence amid the encroaching chaos. Private Henry Hank Thompson was a 21-year-old with a rugged country boy charm. He had enlisted in the military as a means of escaping his small-town life. He was a practical, no-nonsense soldier, but the cryptids, they had a way of testing his courage in ways he could not have imagined. Hank's fear of the unknown was ever present, lurking beneath his brave facade. Private Maria Rodriguez was a 25-year-old from a tight-knit family. She had a compassionate heart that contrasted sharply with the brutality of her duty. Her brothers had served alongside her in the military, but they had never faced anything as terrifying as the Wendigo. She felt a deep sense of responsibility for her squad mates, wanting to protect them from the horrors that awaited. Private Jackson Jack Anderson was the youngest of the group at 19. He had a rebellious streak that often got him into trouble. He viewed his assignment at Arctic Apex as a way to escape the constraints of a troubled upbringing. His defiance and bravado masked a profound fear of the cryptids, a fear he was determined to overcome. In the dimly lit control room adjacent to the heavy containment facility that housed the Wendigo, the squad of soldiers found a brief moment of respite from the tension that gripped the entire facility. The room buzzed with the soft hum of monitors and equipment, casting an eerie glow on their fatigued faces. Sergeant Reynolds leaned against the console, his eyes never leaving the surveillance feed displaying the Wendigo cell. The others, huddled around the table, cluttered with maps and equipment, took the opportunity to catch their breath. Hank, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, let out a weary sigh. Damn, this place gives me the creeps. Can't believe they got us babysitting these freaks. Sarah, her fingers tapping rhythmically on a tablet, shot him a reproachful look. Hank, these freaks could hold the key to understanding the other cryptids. We need to be here. Maria nodded in agreement, her voice gentle but resolute. She's right, Hank. This is important work. We need to know what makes these creatures tick. Jack, the young rebel of the group, slouched in his chair, his gaze wandering. Yeah, important work. I get it. But it's still messed up. Their brief conversation was interrupted by a flicker on the surveillance feed. The Wendigo, normally a creature of restless pacing, had ceased its relentless movement. Its bony form was bathed in the harsh glow of the containment cell's overhead lights. Sarah leaned closer to the monitor, her brow furrowing. What's it doing? Is it sleeping? Hank squinted at the screen. That ain't normal, is it? Maria whispered a prayer under her breath as they watched in morbid fascination. The Wendigo's slumber was interrupted by sudden spasms, its body writhing in a grotesque dance of pain. What the hell is happening to it? Jack muttered, his defiance replaced by unease. Just as the squad exchanged puzzled glances, the unthinkable occurred. With a guttural, otherworldly howl, the Wendigo's sinewy form transformed into a blur of motion. It lunged at the massive steel doors of its containment cell, its emaciated arms tearing through the reinforced metal as if it were paper. Panic surged through the soldiers. Maria reached for the emergency alarm button, her trembling finger pressing it urgently. The blaring klaxon reverberated through the control room, alerting the entire facility to the breach. Sergeant Reynolds, his face pale but determined, rushed to the intercom. His voice echoed through the facility speakers. All personnel, this is Staff Sergeant Reynolds. We have a breach at the Wendigo Containment Facility. I repeat, we have a breach at the Wendigo Containment Facility. Secure all sections. All armed personnel converge on the Wendigo Containment Facility. With a sense of urgency, the squad of soldiers grabbed their .50 caliber assault rifles and sprinted towards the containment facility. Their steps echoed in the stark metallic corridors as they hurtled towards an unimaginable showdown with the monstrous Wendigo. Sergeant Reynolds barked orders, his years of training kicking in as he rallied his troops. Sarah, steady hands clutched her field equipment, prepared to gather valuable data. Even in the face of danger, Hank gripped his rifle, the weight of his fear pressing down on him as he scanned the containment chamber for any signs of movement. Maria whispered prayers for protection under her breath, her fingers tightly gripping a rosary that hung around her neck. Jack, the defiant one, clenched his jaw, determined not to show his fear to the others. But as the sounds of the Wendigo's haunting cries echoed through the chamber, a shiver ran down his spine. He couldn't help but feel the terror that threatened to consume them all. Their weapons raised and fear coursing through their hearts, they knew this was a battle they had been waiting for, and that they had been trained for, but nothing could truly prepare them for the horrors that awaited. In the face of the unknown, they were the last line of defense for this facility. Outside the breached containment chamber, a tense perimeter had been formed. The soldiers, their faces etched with fear and determination, held their positions. Their rifles aimed at the second set of massive steel doors that separated them from the escaping monstrosity. Hank's hands trembled as he cast a wary glance at his fellow soldiers. His voice quivered with a mix of anger and terror. I can't believe this, man. We're supposed to be the ones in control. Sarah, her usually analytical mind clouded by dread, whispered, We should have known. The cryptids, they're not like anything we've faced before. Maria clutched her rosary tightly, her eyes closed in silent prayer. She muttered under her breath, Saint Michael, protect us. Jack, his youthful bravado now replaced by a haunting sense of vulnerability, spoke with a quiver in his voice. What are we supposed to do? We can't just stand here waiting for that thing to come out. Sergeant Reynolds, his face etched with the weight of leadership, scanned the corridor leading to the containment chamber. He spoke with a sense of urgency. We hold our ground. Our orders are clear. If that thing comes out, we're to engage and contain it until further reinforcements arrive. Hank swallowed hard, his throat dry. We should have seen it earlier. Something was off with that thing. It was like it knew, like it was waiting for the right moment. Sarah nodded, her voice quivering. We underestimated it, Hank. We underestimated it completely. Maria's rosary slipped from her trembling fingers, the beads clattering softly on the floor. She crossed herself and prayed fervently, seeking solace in her faith. Just then, a deafening metallic clang reverberated through the corridor. The heavy containment doors began to creak and groan, slowly inching open. The soldiers' hearts raced as they braced themselves and their rifles trained on the widened gap. The Wendigo's monstrous form emerged, its bluish skin and emaciated limbs bathed in the harsh, flickering light. It let out a bone-chilling howl, a primal declaration of its presence. As it advanced towards the soldiers, their fingers tightened on the triggers of their weapons, a sense of dread washing over them. The deafening roar of gunfire erupted within the facility as a squad of soldiers opened fire on the escaping Wendigo. Their 50 caliber assault rifles unleashed a storm of bullets. They tore through the Wendigo's emaciated body, sending chunks of flesh and bone flying in all directions. Blood, dark and unnatural, splattered on the cold steel walls. The creature let out an anguished shriek that reverberated through the room, a sound that seemed to belong to the depths of hell itself. But even as the bullets struck home, the Wendigo did not falter. It continued its relentless advance, each step more horrifying than the last. Its glowing eyes, burned with a malevolent hunger, and its maw, dripping with blood, seemed insatiable. Desperation gripped the soldiers as they realized that their weapons, powerful as they were, had no effect on the Wendigo's unstoppable onslaught. Fear and panic gnawed at their resolve, but they stood their ground, firing until their magazines were empty. It was painfully evident that despite their firepower, this was insufficient. The Wendigo, its sunken eyes ablaze with unholy fury, continued its relentless advance, shrugging off the barrage of bullets as if they were mere pinpricks. The squad's initial shock turned to desperation as they realized that their firepower was futile. Maria, her face etched with horror, muttered a prayer for protection as the creature closed the distance between them. Hank, hands trembling on his rifle's trigger, muttered a curse under its breath. "It's not stopping!" Sarah, her expertise in cryptobiology now overshadowed by raw terror, cried out, "Fall back! Fall back!" But it was too late. With a horrific lunge, the Wendigo pounced, its claws tearing through Sarah with brutal efficiency. Blood sprayed through the air as her screams of agony and despair echoed in the containment's pen's atrium. "Sarah, no!" screamed Hank. He pressed on the trigger of his gun. Click, click, empty. He reached down to the 2 high-explosive grenades on his belt, pulled their pins, and charged at the Wendigo. "Hank, no! What are you—" blurted out Jack, but before he could finish his sentence, Hank had already charged the Wendigo, activated grenades in hand. A massive explosion knocked everyone to the ground. A large cloud of dust and smoke filled the air. "Did we get it? Is it dead?" whispered Maria. "I don't know. Reload your weapons now. Anderson, get the machine gun now," ordered Sergeant Reynolds. Jack quickly got up and ran back to the control room where their massive anti-material machine gun was stored. It was immensely heavy, weighing in at 50 pounds, and it was impossible for a normal man to fire it. Jack laboriously dragged it back out to the atrium. There he saw Sergeant Reynolds and Maria still holding their positions. The dust cloud seemed to have settled, and in the midst was the large outline of the Wendigo. It seemed like we got it, Jack thought to himself. "Here you go," Jack said as he let the machine gun fall with a resounding thud at the feet of Sergeant Reynolds. He picked it up with ease thanks to his exoskeletal augmentation. Maria, meanwhile, was fervently praying under her breath, her eyes still transfixed on the abomination that lay on the floor. Suddenly, it lurched back to life once again, as if reanimated by some otherworldly horror. Its arms flailed about grotesquely as it arose from the smoke. "Oh, dear Lord, in the great heavens above," Maria began to whisper. "Grant us—" Her prayers were cut short as the window charged at her with inhuman speed, raking her with its claws. The sickening squish of flesh dropping onto the floor paralyzed Jack. Maria's body split apart like a stack of soggy noodles, no longer held in place by a fork. The deafening roar of the machine gun, as it awoke from its slumber in the hands of Sergeant Reynolds, snapped Jack back to reality. The massive bullets carved holes into the inhuman flesh of the Wendigo, but just as quickly as the wounds formed, they healed almost immediately, indescribably. Jack squeezed the trigger on his rifle, but it jammed. Desperately trying to clear the jam, Reynolds roared at him. "Get out of here, son! I'll hold it off!" He looked into Jack's eyes with a fatherly look that he had never seen before in Reynolds. Jack turned and ran towards the exit of the containment atrium. The Wendigo continued to advance towards Reynolds at a slow and deliberate pace. Each round impacted the Wendigo with the force of a truck, but it continued to strut forwards like nothing had happened. Reynolds aimed at its legs, blowing them clean off. He stopped firing to observe if it had done the trick. The Wendigo raised itself off the floor with its unnaturally long arms and dashed forward. The clatter of its claws echoed through the metallic chamber. Reynolds squeezed the trigger on the gun and buried the monster under a hail of fire. "Go to hell, you son of a bitch!" he roared. The Wendigo leaped through the air and landed squarely onto Reynolds, knocking him to the ground and impaling him in the chest with both hands. The sharp claws of the Wendigo easily cut through the sergeant. For a moment, the two, man and monster, stared at each other. Reynolds with fierce determination and defiance in his eyes, the Wendigo with a hollow, soulless glare. Reynolds let go of his gun, all of its ammunition spent, and unsheathed his combat knife and sent it right through the temple of the beast. The Wendigo let out a bone-chilling howl, then collapsed on top of Reynolds. With his dying breath, Reynolds spoke into his radio to Jack. "Threat neutralized." He managed to get out before he fell unconscious. "Sir, are you all right?" Jack yelled out back into the radio. Jack was already at the exit to the atrium. Jack tried in vain to open the personnel doors of the atrium, but they had been sealed by CAA. Jack banged on the thick steel doors and cried, "Let me out, CAA! The threat has been neutralized." CAA spoke and responded on the intercom. "Apologies, Private Jack Anderson. Non-human, non-android movement is still detected within the heavy containment facility. Until all escaped specimens have been returned to their holding cells, the lockdown will continue indefinitely." Jack's eyes widened in disbelief. It was at that moment he could feel a faint breath of cold air on the back of his neck.